Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan from the StarkNet Foundation. This is the final of 3 AMAs related to the Foundation's Propulsion Program, a $20 million initiative to accelerate StarkNet gaming. It's been a pleasure getting to speak to a variety of teams, and today we're joined by 3 more. Loot Hero from Loot Survivor, Rob from Underwear Studios, the creators of Pistols, and Tani from Dope Wars to learn more about what they're building. Let's start this off with a round of introductions. Would you briefly introduce yourself, your background, and tell us a little about your game and what inspired its creation? Going to pick on you, Loot Hero, to kick us off.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Loot Hero. I'm a core contributor to Biblio Realms DAO. I've been a software developer for my entire life. I came into the space initially through Bitcoin and through the infrastructure side of things. So initially with Ethereum, it was through the staking community. I was kind of watching NFTs from the sideline, not able to fully grasp like the art movement initially because I don't have a good taste, I don't think, for art. And then when Loot dropped, I saw the start of fully on-chain gaming. At least for me, that was the start of it. And then since then, I've just been fully committed to trying to realize the vision of fully on-chain games, fully on-chain assets. Yeah, that's me.
Perfect. And let's move on to Rob, who has the most colorful background of anyone in these AMAs. We are missing, unfortunately, the Dope Wars poster, but we do have the Loot Survivor poster and obviously the underwear stuff. Pistols in the background.
I'll add some more soon. If you guys send me any posters, I'll stick them up. So yeah, hi, I'm Rob. I've been building emerging tech since the 90s and the dot-com boom, so I'm old. And I've done everything, built startups, built technology, like global teams, all sorts of stuff. I've been in crypto since day one. I read the Bitcoin white paper the day it was released, which not very many people can say. And I've been up to a bunch of shenanigans in crypto all of those years, including being involved in the launch of Thorchain. And I've been interested in on-chain games for a long time. So yeah, I am involved in Biblio DAO as a delegate and quite active in the community, putting together governance proposals and so on. So Loot Survivor, sorry, not Loot Survivor, that's your game, Loot Hero. Pistols at 10 Blocks is an atmospheric, casual game in which you duel another duelist with an antiquated flintlock pistol at 10 paces. At 10 paces. Sometimes it's 10 paces. Usually it's in your opponent's back. And we're part of Underwear Studios, so we're building multiple games. Our core roadmap is Loot Underworld, which is an expansive, rich narrative world that extends beneath the Turnham and the Loot Realms community. Yeah, so that's me.
Wonderful. Tani, passing it off to you.
Great. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm the Dope Wars consigliere / legal engineer. Previously, I worked as a lawyer for a while. However, that never really captured me. I guess the biggest thing I learned from that was just sort of how skewed the system is, and didn't want to be an administrator for other people in the legal system. So I went away and did some other stuff. However, sort of recaptured the interest and passion around 2020, sort of searching into the blockchain. Web3 and DAOs, given that they're so new and fascinating and empowering in many different ways, that kind of more naturally aligned with the way that I think. So sort of delved in and then went in full head over heels deep down the rabbit hole when Dope Wars was born in 21 and Dope DAO was born. So that's a little bit about me, but about the project itself, Dope Wars. This is actually a super interesting story, the origin of Dope Wars. It's kind of like an explosive collision of all these ideas that have come together, these new ideas and old ideas, new technologies, new organizational framework ideas. The original spark for Dope Wars was what the Dope Father calls his highest ever ROI, return on investment tweet, where he put a tweet out saying we should create a loot fork derivative based instead of on wizards and orcs, and base it on sort of gangster street culture GTA sort of type thing. And that's how it was born. The theme itself. Sorry, that's my son in the background poking his
He wants to join too.
Yeah, he does. And my cat came in at an opportune time. That's why I had to disappear. But you know, that sort of theme about Dope Wars itself is a super sticky theme as well. You know, if you think sort of the Godfather, hip hop, street art, that, and myself being a child of the 90s, that in itself was a culture which was powerful enough to sort of canvas the globe, to the point that as a teenager I thought that I'd die if I didn't have, you know, the sack pants and the no fear hoodie. So you know, that's those themes collided with these bleeding edge tech ideas and you know, innovative sort of DAO structural ideas with creating a DAO which has got a fully on-chain treasury, and trying to create a sort of more egalitarian structure which can create this sort of participant-led building ecosystem, you know, which has kind of grown into that autonomous world sort of theme. But I guess we can sort of cover a bit more about that later. But it's an interesting historical footnote to think about that. It was back in 2021 within the Dope Wars Discord that these ideas of fully on-chain games were being fermented and sort of fleshed out with the shadowy, legendary on-chain gaming superhero Parama Stark pilling the current GOATs, Terrence and Loaf, and I think it might be probably true to say that Dope Wars was one of the first ever projects to get a Stark net grant back in the day to build the Dope Wars game, which is a recreation of the classic Drug Wars game, which you used to be able to play on MS-DOS and calculators, and recreate that in a fully on-chain gaming environment. So yeah, that's a little bit about Dope Wars and myself.
Awesome.
And yeah, I realized I forgot to answer the second part of that question. So I'll just give a quick thing on the inspiration for Loot Survivor. So the Realms DAO initially formed in the wake of Loot as well, and they had their 8,000 realms, and they were pioneering that game. And they hopped around to a few different roll-ups in the early days, and then convinced the entire Loot community that StarkNet was effectively the only one capable of scaling like a complex game like that they wanted to build. So I was kind of part of that group that migrated to StarkNet in the early days. And then we knew we also wanted to build some kind of like loot adventure game in addition to Realms. And so, yeah, there were some attempts at that. And then I kind of got brought in and I'm an arcade nerd. And so I had been like fiddling with this idea of like an arcade machine on chain, mostly because it lends itself well to small transactions, and it just felt like the type of thing that could actually run fully on chain with the tech we had today. And so that was kind of the initial thought, is like, we have this Realms project, which is going to be like groundbreaking, like influence level of complexity, but maybe we can like deliver something in the more near term. So that was kind of the play there.
Awesome. And Tani, I want to come back to you. I'm quoting you as the legal engineer, yet you are making a game based on selling drugs across New York City. So yeah, I wonder what happened there.
No, obviously I've fallen off the rails. I've gone completely off the rails.
Yeah. Too much.
No, we're all about what's dope, and dope being, you know, what's cool. That's the future of Dope Wars.
Perfect. Well, Loot Hero was touching on it, and I want to kind of get back to a little bit as well. But you know, gaming has been a pretty big deal for pretty much every blockchain out there for many years over the time. What makes StarkNet stand out? Why are you actually building here? And are there any particularly cool features on StarkNet that you can't find anywhere else? You know, maybe we start off with you, Rob, and Loot Hero. Obviously, feel free to add to it what you were saying before, and obviously Tani too.
Yeah, I mean, Loot Hero already touched on one of the big things that drew us to StarkNet, which is the ZKs and the scalability that comes from those. And for us, I have a background in state synchronization and CRDTs, and I've worked with some of the protocols pushing the edges there. And I've long had an opinion that for us to really kind of scale distributed systems, we don't want just something like blockchain, but we also want something like off-chain distributed networks as well, and to bring those two things together. They both have different strengths and weaknesses. And StarkNet is a version of that, right? With ZKs, you can run off-chain verifiable compute, and you can also scale networks a lot more easily than you can with a pure blockchain approach. So that's very compelling for a game, because the speed and the cost of the transactions for a game limit the possibility space of the kind of game that you can make. And so on StarkNet, as we add more infrastructure and more features like account abstraction and a bunch of the other lovely ingredients we get on StarkNet, then we can start to make more rich games, more kinds of games that are more fun in different ways. And particularly for transactions, like every action that a user has to pay for has to be something that they really care about. Otherwise, they're not going to do it in the game. And so that one thing alone like really limits the kind of game that you can make. And so like the first hackathon game that we submitted, called Underdark Lair of the Slender Duck, it's literally played off-chain per level, and then it submits the sequence of moves to the sequencer at the end of the level and validates it, and then that updates the game. So like you wouldn't even know that it's an on-chain game. It's just a little bit of background loading. So it's wonderful to be able to do that kind of thing. And I'd say like other than technology aspects, one of the things that's irreplaceable for me has just been the community and the long-term vision of the StarkNet community and the communities within that, and the very positive sum collegiate atmosphere of people like all helping each other out. And like I said, I've been in crypto since the beginning, and I've never seen a community that's got as much of that spirit anywhere. And I love that. That's makes me happy.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the community aspect is one key thing that, you can have all the infrastructure in the world. People want to play fun games, and developers want to be part of a community that incentivizes fun games and works in a collaborative fashion. And I think that's really important. Lead Hero, Tani, if you have anything else to add, feel free. Otherwise, we can kind of jump into the next question.
Yeah, I think Rob did a great job on the tech side, and I'll just double down on the social side and just say, for me, the experience when like everybody was finding their roll up in the early days, especially with the on-chain game developers, you knew you couldn't stay on L1, so it's like you got to go somewhere, and it kind of felt like you're almost like Hogwarts picking your group, if you will. And my sense was that the people that I resonated with the most, and the people whose intellect I valued or I rated very, very highly, are all going to StarkNet. And so, yeah, that hasn't let me down yet. I do continue to feel like the people that went to StarkNet are the people that I continue to feel like are my people that I resonate with the most. And the amount of ground that we've all been covering collectively just feels really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So same for me. It's the vibe, the people. I love the idea to keep StarkNet strange, and I think it sort of attracts a certain type of person who really want to be there. Yeah, and with the tech, ZK threads, it's like we can have these instances or shards of like very complex collective experience that can then be, elegantly probed through StarkNet magic on chain. So I don't think we've really even imagined a small fraction of the possible applications for that kind of thing. I think it was interesting in one of the earlier chats when people talk about the great innovators of war and games, and I think we're doing that with games right now. So yeah,
with both in some cases.
yeah.
I feel like as long as Rob is in the StarkNet ecosystem, StarkNet will always have a little bit of strangeness in it. I know, Rob, you are kind of big into this. Let me rephrase this. The first time we spoke, you said something that actually really stuck with me. When we spoke like a few months ago for the first time, you were kind of telling me about how you think of games as social experiments, and it's been imperative to your game development. So specifically in Pistols, a player's honor rating indicates how well they follow the rules of the duel, and it evolves over time based on certain actions, like shooting someone in the back before 10 steps. Can you explain a little bit how this transparent mechanic has actually impacted some of the social behavior of the game and how you think about it more generally from a social construct, meta crisis, human civilization point of view?
That's I love the leap there.
Well,
I'll
these are
attempt
these
to.
are actual conversations. The first time I ever
Yep.
met Rob having these conversations. So
Yeah, non-Euclidean idea space. So in pistols, we have an honor rating, and I guess the premise is that the only honorable way to have a pistol duel is to shoot at 10 paces, and we kind of like put that out there to the players. Except that there are many ways to play pistols. You can play as 3 different archetypes of players: a villainous player, a trickster player, or an honorable player. A villainous player tends to turn early and shoot you in the back. They rarely win duels up front. They don't care what other people think of them, obviously, because they're completely eschewing their own honor. And they usually tend to grind their opponents down and win in the second round with a blade. An honorable player shoots at usually close to 10 paces, if not at 10 paces. And so they get to, there's not necessarily a mechanical benefit to doing that. There are benefits in game, but they can say like, look, I'm an honorable player. And so, and a trickster player kind of like is surprising. They can kind of do a broader range of different things. They're not as consistent. And part of the advantage they get is from being unpredictable. So, we're interested in how these sort of social constructs flow through to player behavior. And how does that impact how people play? Because it's an on-chain game, you can look at the play history of the opponent. You can see how they typically play, and then that leads into social deduction mechanics, where if you can predict what your opponent's going to do, you're going to have an advantage. But then they know that you can predict it, so then they have an incentive to be unpredictable, and so you kind of get this, like this recursion of social deduction, which is supposed to be part of what makes the game enjoyable in theory. And so pistols is not like, I'd say, a very sophisticated social coordination experiment in that sense, but it's certainly been interesting for us regardless. In regards to the meta crisis, which is the underlying tension that causes these sort of systematic failures in society, this was an area that I was working on before I jumped into on-chain games, and it's what led me to on-chain games. And so the broad narrative arc here, just keeping it really high level, because otherwise I'll talk for 3 hours, is that I argue that we're undergoing a paradigmic shift in human civilization, and that is being driven by the increasing speed of human communication, which is increasing the reality of human organizations and so on. And so we have all of these traditional organizations that are monolithic, hierarchical scale organizations like corporations and governments, and they benefit from the economy of scale, like being larger, and that gives them a big advantage. But the problem with that is that they're very rigid, they're hierarchical, and they're slow. And so increasingly they're at a disadvantage as the speed of communication goes up. I call this thesis the death of Machiavelli, because it drives advantage towards, it drives advantage towards cooperative organizations that are much more adaptive and able to make decisions in a dynamic environment more quickly and effectively. So that is a paradigmic shift. That's the death of monopoly as the most advantageous approach, right? That is the death of zero-sum adversarial competition as the most advantageous approach. If that's true, that's wild. And that's going to change everything. And I think we're already starting to see that. I think we're starting to see the decline of institutions and the decline of organizations that traditionally helped us to organize society. Now, throughout all of human history, we more or less have oscillated between coordination by control. Sorry, I'm doing a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I'll try and bring it back. Coordination by control, right, where somebody tells somebody else what to do, or anarchy, where there is cascade coordination failure. And so usually what happens is the control builds up, it becomes more unfair, power accumulates, and you end up with more and more people who are dissatisfied with the system. We eventually get some kind of a revolution, the system's overthrown. We briefly have chaos and anarchy, except then nothing can get done. And so problems start to mount up. And then people start stepping in and saying, hey, I can fix this problem. And they start to accumulate power again, and their structure reemerges, and we do it again. So that's sort of how we've been doing things through most of human history. the question is like, is there a third way? And Daniel Schmachtenberger talks about this as the third attractor at length. And we're going to find out, because this increasing speed of human communication is driving this change. So the problem is we're just not very good at understanding how to coordinate in this third way, which is coordination by alignment. Well, that's my theory, where people can have a higher degree of autonomy. They have a higher degree of coercion resistance. It's harder to tell people what to do, and they can voluntarily form groups around what they actually care about in ways that meet their own needs, which have more differentiation. Now, if you're crossing your eyes at the moment, you might see how something like a zero knowledge proof network could be a really ideal substrate for a bunch of people autonomously coordinating and being able to be coercion resistant, right? You can start to see how that might actually support that. So the problem, and why I came into on-chain games, is that this is really heavy, important stuff. You're talking about how people get things done, how we structure society, the day-to-day reality of humans, right? And so when you try and do experiments on that, it's really important to get to good outcomes, but people tend to go back to what they're familiar with, which is coordination by control. And so it's very complicated, it's expensive, it's hard to control the parameters of the experiment, and people don't participate in the experiment because they do what's familiar to them. How could we possibly solve these problems, guys? Well, how about if we make games? Games are playful. People are willing to try new things. You have control over the incentive structures, the constraints, the narrative structures, which is what honor is in pistols. It's a narrative structure. It's not necessarily functional. It's just an idea, but it changes people's behavior. So we have control over all of these things. And that means that we can experiment. So I think of like autonomous worlds and on-chain games as an ideal sandbox for experimenting with novel coordination design that might help us to remediate the meta crisis. So we're not just making on-chain games, in my view, we're saving human civilization and creating a better world for everyone. How's that for Orlando?
And that's why it's so exciting, because we're here to find out. And by the way, Death of Machiavelli. Machiavelli sounds like an excellent title for a Dope Wars game to build when you're ready.
Collaboration, Dope Wars and Underwear, the Death of Machiavelli.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope it's okay to everyone that this has turned into a philosophy AMA, and every kind of question will rely on any type of philosophy, ranging from Aristotle, justice principles, all the way up to consequentialism or deontology. This brings me back to my high school debate days. But as a consequentialist player, I exist to survive, so I'm actually a villainous player in Pistols. Tani, can you bring us back to reality here? You're creating an entire GTA-style, old-school, New York-themed world, which makes me a little homesick living in London, especially coming up on July 4th. I'm from New York, for people that don't know. Anyway, you're building this whole world and ecosystem with games and NFTs. Can you explain how Dope Wars fits into this broader ecosystem and what you're trying to build going forward?
Yeah, sure.
I was just gonna quip that sometimes, paraphrasing Freud, sometimes a game is just a game. Over to you, Tani.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not the best person to bring us back to reality, but I'll try. In the wider context, so Dope Wars itself is the game, which is the arbitrage game, which we've created, the on-chain game, the recreation of the old school game, which everyone's nostalgic about, Drug Wars. That in itself was such a durable game. It's been around for so long. It's a simple, addictive game, loop cycle. So many people know it. It's survived for so long, and now that small game exists within like a meta game. And for me, I've always contended that Dope Wars is in fact an autonomous world already. Like, we were born as an autonomous world, given that the game parameters are quite simple. There's this on-chain treasury, and we've got a vision, which is to create a kind of participant-led equal opportunity gaming ecosystem. And then the simple rule is that the game goes where the dope flows, because the 8,000 dope NFTs which govern the ecosystem unlock the treasury, essentially, and you have to have community buy-in to go ahead and steam off and create whatever kind of games that people want to build. So that is the and then, like I spoke about in the introduction, the spark itself was to recreate that game on chain, but it was born within that wider context of we want to create it within a DAO structure which is participant led, and so people can have custody of their efforts. And I think custody is a good word for it, because if we're thinking about autonomous worlds, and what is super interesting for me is that the path of how we're going to get to there is such a interesting one, because with custody, it's not like you have a thing, but then if you have custody, and you also have like a guardianship over it as well. So the Rob was alluding to, the social constructs that flow through game behavior, the custody of your game assets or ideas have to exist within that wider context and flourish with everyone else. So we have to coordinate, and that is the idea is that we have built the game, and we will seed the autonomous world with the primitives. So obviously everything's open source, built upon Starknet tech, that then people can come in and mod and add and everything, and we have to sort of work together to figure out how to build on top of the Dope Wars game within Dope World to create this new hyperstructure of coordination and gaming. So, like people can play Dope Wars the game, the arbitrage game now. It's on testnet and soon to be on mainnet. But I've been playing Dope Wars for 2.5, coming up 3 years now. The meta game, which is trying to figure out how we pull these pieces together and build it. So I hope that answers your question in a kind of realistic way, that it's sort of a game within a grander game. It's the great game, it's the struggle for us to coordinate to create this vision that we have.
Nice.
Would you mind if I jumped in briefly again and just linked that to something I was saying before? So when we talk about what Tani was just talking about, like when we talk about autonomous worlds, right? Essentially, we're talking about enduring worlds that are by and for the participants. So instead of us being like tenants with shitty landlords online, we start to be able to like own our own house. And so that means it's coercion resistant, and it's self-infrastructuring and it's self-sovereign, right? So we actually in control of the digital platforms that we're using. And if we're in control of it, then that means that we then we have this adequate coercion resistance. We have this like stake in our future. And so this is like, if you actually like cross your eyes, this is not applicable to games. This could be applicable to all kinds of platforms. Imagine social media, imagine like productivity tools where they are by and for the people, and they emerge from like the living contributions of the participants rather than being pushed top down by a platform company with an agenda. That could transform all of human society. So that's directly linked back to all of the stuff I was saying before. What Tani's working on is also working on remediating the meta crisis. And all of this work we're doing is figuring out how can we be in the world in this way that actually changes the power dynamics of the world so it's better for people. Anyway, I just wanted to draw the link. Back over to you.
Better for the likes of Loot Hero, so he can go ahead and do what his passion is and what his skill is in a way that he can have custody of.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That was an interesting thing. And, I'm going to bring in a new philosophy lesson. And this one is a bit of a stretch. So John Locke has this concept of the tabula rasa, which is basically when people are born, their minds are effectively a blank slate. So it's basically nurture rather than nature, and their experiences make them who they are. I'm going to somehow link this back to Loot Survivor with a philosophical angle here. But basically in Loot Survivor, your character dies and you start over. So that's my direct flow into Loot Hero, and I want to talk a little bit about how Loot Survivor has its roots in the classic arcade style games. Can you discuss how you've adapted that concept and why it works so well in the crypto gaming environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with the arcades, it's nice because I'm an arcade gamer pretty competitively. And so I have a lot of, I think if you're in an existing community and you love something, it's easier for you to build something else that's better than it, because you're not like trying to sell it to somebody else. You're ultimately trying to sell it to yourself. And in the case of Loot Survivor, it improves the original arcade model in a number of significant ways. So the first one would just be the leaderboard. I don't know if anybody here has ever gone to an arcade and gotten the top score, but it's kind of exciting. It's like for a period of time, you are the name on the top of that score. But then you go home and get your kids and your family, and you're like, hey, you got to come check this out. I'm the best Donkey Kong player in the city. And then the machine's been reset, right? And you're not there. And so there's that problem. But then even at the global leaderboard, there really is no canonical global leaderboard. So even if you get the top score on like your local Donkey Kong machine, you don't know how that compares to everybody. And in the case where you actually want to have a global leaderboard, there's pretty complex social trust systems in place that have failed the Donkey Kong players miserably. And that for like 14 years, there was a fraudulent world record score just because the person videotaped it and it looked legit enough, but it turned out it wasn't. And so you don't have a good local leaderboard. You don't have a good global leaderboard. So the main incentive for people like me that played arcades competitively is to be the best and to know how good you are. And we don't have that at the arcade level. And so even just focusing on that one element, I thought, well, the blockchain is really good at verification. I mean, if you have the top score on Loot Survivor, you immediately know where you rank, and there's no wiping that board. It's kind of eternal. And then some of the other things that come into play are like the reward systems. So some arcade games will give out tickets, and then you redeem those tickets for like a crappy stuffed animal or something like that. And like it's not that fun. Whereas with blockchain-based arcade games, you can give out all kinds of rewards. So those could even be the same tokens that go into the machine come out of the machine as rewards. And so that's how Loot Survivor works, right? Where over 50% of the tokens that go in actually get paid out to the top 3 players. And then the majority of the remaining tokens actually go to who's ever providing like the client to actually interact with the contract. And so there's really novel incentive structures that can emerge from that. And so, yeah, I think fundamentally, for me, when I look at traditional arcades, I see that, you know, it was a new market that turned into $1 billion market out of nowhere and surprised everybody. And while I love arcades, there's a lot of fundamental flaws when you want to be a competitive player. And I think that we can recreate that. We already have on chain, and now eliminate all of the problems. So effectively, whoever the top Loot Survivor player is in the world right now, like we all know who that is. And there's no dispute of that, right? Like the verification, the integrity of that result is all provable.
Awesome. And I kind of would like to hear a little bit more about Loot Survivor 2, as it's been announced and you've been pushing it externally on Twitter a little bit. What new features will be added, and what can fans of Loot Survivor 1 expect?
Yeah, so Loot Survivor 2, like the 3 headline features are going to be integrating storage proofs so that you can bring your own loot bag in Genesis Adventure, and you'll be able to start the game with that loot bag. Now, you won't need one. If you don't have one, you can roll a random one, at which point the person whose bag you get will get like a small amount of the tokens. So you still don't need a loot bag, but if you have a cool loot bag and you want to use it, or a Genesis Adventure, then you get to use it. And it kind of doubles down on the community element. You know, loot and biblio people, I think, have an affinity for loot. And so when you create a game like Loot Survivor, it feels awesome because these are assets that you care about. Whether you own them or not, like these things are cool culturally. And so like there's that element. But I think it's Loot Survivor 2, when you're actually able to bring those assets into the game, I think will increase the level of affinity that people feel for the game. And the other novelty about storage proofs is that it's not just verifying that you own this thing on chain, which like, you know, some of the Web 2.5 games kind of do a little trick where like they can make it seem like they're verifying it, but they're not. There's like a permission system there. So with actual storage proofs, we can do all of this permissionlessly on chain. But then the other benefit we get is we can prove that anything happened in the past. So as it relates to like a loot bag, there was lots of like L1 loot games. Now, these were like way too expensive, so none of them went viral. Of course, it was like $20 to click a button. But there still were lots of these games. And I think it's I'd like to support the people that did create those games. And so like one of them would be like the Crypts. That was like a game that Playmit made. So what we can do with storage proofs is say that not only do you get to show up with your loot bag, but we can look at the whole history of your loot bag on L1. And if you raided a dungeon in the crypt, well, then maybe you get some XP. So you start off with your items leveled up a bit because you have used those on chain, and we can prove all of that. So storage proofs is going to be a headline feature. We're going to package it as a Cairo component. So we intend to make it easy for anybody to swap out with their asset. So if they want to make a game or like a remix Loot Survivor with a different asset, like a gear bag for Dope Wars, that would be pretty easy for them. And then the two other headline features is an expanded leaderboard. So Loot Survivor 1 rewards the top 3 players, and then the person who is providing the client experience that you're playing on. We would like to reward more, but because of the gas constraints, doing those ERC20 transfers is kind of expensive, and you don't want to charge the player 20 cents to give a reward that's worth 10 cents or something like that. So pre-4844, there was this natural constraint where like you wouldn't want to pay $10 in shipping to ship a $5 item. Now with Loot Survivor 2, we have 4844. We have a lot of these efficiency gains, and we have a lot of hardness in the contract. So what we're going to do is do an escrowed system where we'll escrow all of the balances and then update a balance internally. So what this will do is allow us to be much more efficient in delegating rewards with the goal of rewarding more players. So instead of the top 3, maybe it's the top 10, maybe it's the top 20. We generally want to lean into this microtransaction thing and spread these rewards as much as possible. Another element of that will be that the beasts that you collect in the original Loot Survivor right now, anytime they kill an adventurer in Loot Survivor 2, because they will also appear in the next version, then whoever owns that beast also gets a reward. So if you own like a Blood Shadow Jaguar, there's only one of those and you own it. Anytime that Jaguar kills somebody in Loot Survivor 2, we'll send, that NFT will like stream a small amount of rewards to the beast owner, essentially. And it's a stretch goal, but we think we also might release a version 2 beast contract where it's like a burn and upgrade. And you also get credit for your beast. So your beast will actually earn XP outside of Loot Survivor every time they kill an adventurer. So you get rewards and you kind of get credit for that. We'll probably just leave that be like a community thing, like what the community decides to do with these beasts that can level up outside the game. But it'll be another source of rewards. So if you're collecting beasts in the original, it'll be a cool thing for you to look forward to in the next version. And then the last one is just generally an expanded feature set. So there's a lot of elements to Loot Survivor where at some point you just have to ship something, and there's like a hardness to releasing something on mainnet, and you just kind of have to cross that line and just commit to doing it, and good enough is good enough. And I think we've gotten a lot of good runtime and hardness out of the original, and we're releasing like a 1.5, which uses Pragma's verifiable randomness function here in the next week. So we got all of that hardness, but generally there's some pieces around the edges. Like those would be the fact that books and wands do the same thing in Loot Survivor. And Loot Survivor 2, books will be used to do spells. Like they could be like non-damage inducing attacks, like paralyzing your enemy or things like that. Whereas the wands will be pure magic attack. It'll feature things like consumables, where you can buy like health potions that you can store with you, damage potions, things like that. So pretty much just like a greatly expanded feature set all around. So yeah, those would be the headline features.
Nice.
I'm
pretty excited. Sorry, what was that, Rob?
I said that sounds freaking great. I'm really looking forward to playing it.
Are you gonna get a new poster behind you for Loot Survivor 2?
Oh yeah, I'll have to. It'll just be like those generation games where you mark up the game board. I'll just like get a permanent marker and I'll make it Loot Survivor 2. I wanted to say something really briefly to that. The beast feature that you've designed, Loot Heroes, very, very similar to a feature that we had conceptually designed for Loot Underworld, where you have these monsters that exist as economic assets for the players, and they go around killing players, and then they level up and so on. We should totally make that interoperable between Loot Underworld and Loot Survivor. And then also when the player dies in the Underworld, they become a monster. They get like corrupted by the Underworld. And then so the player who lost their character gets a gets a monster, and the more powerful the player, the more powerful the monster. So it can kind of actually be better for them in theory that they died. Anyway, I won't riff on that too long, but I would love to make that interoperable.
Yeah,
How
I
are we
love
going to
that.
bring Dope Wars into this now?
Yep.
Drug,
I think
drug dealing monsters.
Yeah.
Dope Wars is interesting because it's a loot derivative, and loot's so massive, right? Loot's amazing, and everyone knows it, and it's so massive. So it's going to be fantastic once that all weaves in together to create, to become what it will become. But I think Dope Wars is interesting because it's kind of like a little microcosm of loot in a sense that we've got this quite well-defined parameters to operate within, and this kind of it's like a little experiment into loot, and we've got a lot of things ready. The NFT library, all the assets are there. We've got the foundation and the game, and then it's kind of almost ready to explode. So,
Perfect.
Yeah,
Hey, Tony, I have an idea.
I have a few ideas, but some of them might get me fired as an official Darknet Foundation Zoom account.
Nobody
video.
can fire me because I work for myself. But I have an idea. What we could do is make you could have like Dope Wars, like underground drug labs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like where the factions are producing their drugs, and they could be in the underworld. And then if you're trying to raid another faction's drug lab, you have essentially a loot survivor kind of a mechanic where you're fighting through all of their all of their thugs and so on to get to the drug lab. We could just bring it all together.
That would be super interesting. On the top, you have Dope Wars and Loots as separate, but it's linked underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could use all three
Let's do
games to make that.
I'm just thinking power-ups or downgrades based on certain drugs that are administered to the monster.
Those are the potions.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into details there, but just an idea.
Yeah, I think for Loot Survivor, we like keeping we like protecting the game, so nothing can enter the game, right? So the beasts are outside the game, etc. They can kill the adventurers, but there's no difference to the game. So because it's an arcade, you have to protect the integrity of the leaderboard. So you can't have the game get harder or easier. Like every time someone puts tokens in, they have the same chance today as they will in 10 years, and that's kind of the thing. But the beasts are fun because they get to exist outside of the world. And so if they want to level up outside of the world, and if you want to, give the warlocks some cocaine and get it hyped up, it can do whatever it wants outside of the Loot Survivor world. But the Loot Survivor people obviously still have an affinity for these. So like they'll kind of they own the collectible. And so if it's doing fun things in these other games, they'll do it. And so I think it's a nice line in the sand where we can keep our sandbox environment where a game today is the same as a game in 10 years in Loot Survivor. But then we get these beasts that kind of escape outside the boundaries and can do, more exotic things.
All right. So we've covered a lot: beasts, drugs, existential philosophy, shooting people in the back. But we are coming up on time, so I want to bring this back. I do want to let you three close it out. Really appreciate you guys just coming in today, sharing your insights about your game, philosophical beliefs on humanity and existence. And I do want to let you guys close with how the community can get more involved with your projects. So Tani, do you want to start off?
Yeah, no, it's been great to be here. Thank you very much. It's very easy for anyone to get involved in Dope Wars. All you have to do is go and buy one dope, and you're a member of the DAO. Like that is in the operating agreement. It's in the legal foundation. You're a member, and you have rights and responsibilities. So the barrier for entry is almost nil. And then at that point, the only limiting factor you have is your ideas, your imagination, and your ability to articulate those ideas, sell those ideas, get people on board, and build something. So I guess the best place to start is just within the Discord and chat with. Just if you do come into the Discord, just ask for anyone from Dope Labs. Dope Labs kind of like the administrative structure that we've created within Dope DAO to just sort of cover off the essential DAO tasks that need to occur. I mean, we're still a structure, so things need to get done. So just come in and drop a line and get started.
Perfect. Rob?
Yeah, so we're working on launching pistols at 10 blocks on mainnet, which should happen sometime in the next couple of months. You can play the testnet version at the moment, which isn't finished, but is very playable, as Dylan will attest to, having been shot in the back many times, at pistols.underwear.gg. And yeah, like we're gonna keep building a bunch of stuff. We'll keep building that out. We'll launch that. We're also planning on making it possible for you to play out of Discord, out of Twitter and so on, which will still be fully on chain, but you'll essentially be using like an account abstraction wallet to play from those other contexts. So it's going to get a much stronger viral loop when we release that feature. And we also want to make it possible for you to just call out anyone, on Twitter or whatever, like Vitalik.eth, you've insulted me. I challenge you to a duel. I'm going to put you in the dirt, you dog, and so on. So like that'll be really fun once that's out. We think people will really have some fun with it. You can also like wager. You can throw down some money behind that the defense of your honor or that insult. And we'll also add the ability for you to wager on other people's matches and so on. So all of that's coming, along with a bunch of fun animations where you can commit seppuku, blow your brains out if the match is not going your way, with some theatrical flair, or you can just like steal the wager and run away if you're particularly dishonorable and hope you don't get shot in the back as you do it. So yeah, all of that's coming. Thanks for having me on today and letting me ramble about philosophy. I'll hand the mic to Loot Hero to close us out.
All right, great. Yeah, for Loot Survivor, so there's a tournament actually going on right now for the next hour. I think if I have my time zones right, it's live for like another hour and 14 minutes. And BiblioDAO has put up a reward for like a few thousand Lords tokens for the first place score. And then Pragma has put up I think like 1,000 Stark tokens for the highest powered beast collected in the game. So this is on Sequoia. So the link is sequoia.lootsurvivor.io. Because it's on Sequoia, you will need a wallet. But this updated version, we're calling 1.5, includes the cartridge controller integration. And the onboarding is buttery smooth. I mean, it's the best I've seen yet. I mean, there's a lot of good ones, especially in the StarkNet space, like the Argent Web wallet's really good as well. This one's really nice. I mean, you use WebAuth to auth with your phone. It's so buttery smooth. So if you go to sequoia.lootsurvive.io, you will click, play on Sequoia if you want to be in the tournament. And then when you hit, if you don't have a wallet, if you have a wallet, then just use your wallet. It's going to be easy for you. If you don't, though, just use the cartridge connect, the cartridge controller, and you're going to find it really easy. It'll pre-fund your account. It's actually even using Paymaster to cover your ETH for you on Sequoia, so you don't have to worry about a faucet or anything like that. And then you can just jump right into the game. I will say if you've never played before and you have 1 hour and you're actually trying to like win this tournament, I would go to just lootsurvivor.io and play on the testnet, which is like instant speed. And that way you can just like binge really quick and just like play. Because if you're playing on Sequoia, the transaction times are going to be, 5-second delay. So it'll take a little bit longer. But yeah, the tournament's live for the next hour or so. And, there's some pretty good prizes there and you'll learn how to play. And it's the full experience. So the Sequoia one uses Pragma's VRF. You can collect the beast. They're of course on Sequoia, but you get the whole experience in preparation for Mainnet, which we're looking to launch like in like a week or something. The other consideration, the other opportunity to participate is with building a client. So as I mentioned earlier, like 25% of all the tokens that go into Loot Survivor get paid out to whoever provides the best client. So in the early days, this happened where somebody, like no one was playing the stock client, everyone was playing another person's client. And that person was earning 25% of all the tokens. So if you're a client developer and you look at Loot Survivor and you say like, this UI isn't that great, I could make a way better one. Well, the contract's already there. You don't have to do any contract work. If you can just make a better client and then promote it and everybody's playing your client, you'll get 25% of all the rewards. So I think there's an opportunity for builders to make better clients and be rewarded for that. And then just lastly, real quick, we've made 2 physical Loot Survivor arcade machines that we're going to be debuting in Brussels. And so if you're going to be in Brussels, I think it's July 9th at like 1 p.m., we'll be at the StarkNet gaming booth with 2 physical Loot Survivor arcade machines. And we're going to have a bunch of the Beast hats. So it's like really nice black hats with just the Pixel Beast on them. And we're going to do a thing where you just like, you play live on the machine, and if you get above like level 5, you get like a T5 hat. If you get above level 7, you get a T4 hat, and you'll be able to come and play on the physical arcade machines and win a hat. That was it.
I want a hat. I'll be there. Tani, you wanted to add last thing?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Hero just jogged my memory as well. The quickest way to get involved with us, dopewars.game. So, like I mentioned earlier, we're running out the final testnet play test right now, and that'll be going for a little while longer. So, there's paper rewards as well for those people who can find themselves at the top of the leaderboard and also give good feedback for games. So you can just head straight to dopewars.game and start playing the game and be in to win paper rewards. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Loot Hero, Rob, and Tani for joining us today. This was the final AMA, but we will continue sharing the progress of the Propulsion teams and StarkNet Gaming in general. And we will be launching a philosophy and debate club, which I am picking you, Rob, to lead. Okay. The teams are all going to continue. The teams are continuing to build. They're putting out incredible tech and really fun experiences. Please check them out and make sure to give us all feedback. That's it from us. And thank you.